Hello and welcome to another update. In this one I'll be covering the latest updates from the front line. We'll be going through the different parts of the front as well as a general update on the situation in Russia. So starting out in the Zaporizhzhia front, the Ukrainian forces continue their attacks across the front line, both to the south of Orikhiv in the direction of Serbianki, in the direction of the south of Olyapole, east of Cherivne, and generally in the Velika Novosilka area, as the Ukrainian forces continue to attempt to advance. But over the past few days we have received no updates on any advances, which indicates that the Ukrainian offensive has lost its momentum yet again, as they have managed to capture Rivnopil, but they have not managed to capitalize any gains from that capture, which indicates that the capture was most likely a Russian retreat to some rear positions in the back in the direction of Priotine or Saromayske, retreating to these positions as they saw some indication that their position would become overrun, especially since there's large gaps between the Russian defensive lines in this area, which would indicate that the Ukrainians could start a pincer attack from both directions, which would allow them to cut off the Russian forces. So they decided to retreat before a Ukrainian advance would be possible. After that, the Ukrainians managed to capture the village of Rivnopil, but then the fighting continues here to the south of the area. People have since requested from me to show a topographic map. So here we have the deep state map on the topographic mode, and from this we can see multiple things. First off, here to the east of Rivnopil, we see that the ledge here is on the low ground in comparison to Rivnopil, because we have the areas right here, which indicates a topographic difference, which goes in height in this direction. So the Russian forces beyond this area have the high ground in comparison to the Ukrainian forces within this ledge. That was before the Ukrainian capture of Rivnopil. We also see that the Ukrainians actually had the high ground here to the north of Rivnopil, as there is this height difference right here. However, we also see that this area right here is also in the high ground compared to Rivnopil, and the same as it continues further southwards. The further northwards you are, the higher the ground is, and the further southwards you are, the lower the ground is. But then we also see here to the Remivka area and Volodne area, it looks like a very small valley that goes through this area right here, which could indicate that the Russian forces most likely do not have any positions in these villages, but most likely they're holding the villages to the north of them, and then they're holding positions here to the south of these villages and the high ground in comparison to the valley that goes through this area. Similarly, the area, this whole area here, is on the high ground compared to the eastern parts, both Staromayske and Staromilivka. The western parts are on the high ground, which indicates that this whole area here is much more important than the valley itself, because as long as the Russian forces hold this area, they'll be able to defend the positions here on the eastern parts, or even if the Ukrainians manage to capture them, they will still end in a position where they could take heavy losses due to the Russians holding the high grounds next to the villages. However, it is also important for the Ukrainians to capture these villages, because if they manage to capture them, then the main supply roads in and out of these areas will be cut, which will allow them to capture them without fighting in it. So it will be a question of, will you fight through these fields where you can get easily hit by artillery as you try to advance through the areas held by the Russian forces, or will you fight through the villages on the eastern part by the river line, where the Russians will have the high ground, which will allow them for more direct fire, but in comparison you will not be going through the open fields. Similarly, here to the eastern side, we see that the further north you are, the higher the ground is, which indicates that the Ukrainians fighting through the southern parts here, through the open fields, have chosen the second approach, which is to fight through the open fields here on the eastern parts, as they try to capture the villages here to the east through advancing in this direction rather than through the river line. As they are staying on the river line on the western part, or on the eastern part of the river line, they are fighting through the open fields. Other than that, we have these two videos. The first one is on the Zaporizhzhia front. I'm not exactly sure where it is on the Zaporizhzhia front, as I have not geolocated the video and there's no geolocation for it available as of yet. but it is a video of Russian artillery hitting Ukrainian positions across the front line by the forest patches. Most likely these forest lines are here to the south of Novodanilivka in the direction of Robotyne, because we see many of these forest lines in this area in comparison to the other parts of the front line, especially the area of Velika Novosilka, where there are less forest patches and more open fields. So it is more open in this part, and there's a few villages here and there, while on this part it's essentially just open fields with no villages. Then we have this other video here, which shows a Russian mine clearing vehicle shooting at some Ukrainian placed mines here in the flanks of Bakhmut, either by the northern or southern flank. Other than that, we have also reports of the Ukrainian forces generally assaulting the different parts of the Bakhmut front, especially at the northern flank, as the Ukrainians attack in 3 different directions, both in the Berhivka direction as well as by Orihovo-Vasilivka, and also in the direction of Soledar from the direction of Vasyokivka. So the Ukrainian forces are here attempting to attack the Russian flank north of Bakhmut as they try to capture the villages in the northern flank and gain possessions by the river line here to the west of Soledar before assaulting Soledar itself, as that is the main target of the northern flank. If the Ukrainians manage to recapture Soledar, then they will have a strong positions of which they can attack all of the supplies going in and out of the Bakhmut city itself. And pushing southwards, they would have to capture Klishchiivka, which would allow them to gain control over the railways, which will allow them to then push on the southern roads in and out of Bakhmut. So essentially, Soledar and Klishchiivka are the main objectives of a Ukrainian counterattack in the direction of Bakhmut. Finally, if we have to take a look at the general situation in Russia, there is this short update which was forwarded to Ryber's Telegram channel, and essentially he splits the issue into 3 parts. There are 3 different essentially classes or groupings in this conflict that happened in Russia. The first one are the uprisers, the ones who were supporting Prigozhin. Then there is the negotiators, the ones who wanted a settlement for peace. And then there is the indecision and failures, which is the Gerasimov group, which is the ones that Prigozhin started this whole quote-unquote march of justice against. So essentially, we have these 3 groupings within the Russian military, and according to these, there are different generals in different groupings. For example, there's Gerasimov and Shoigu in the incompetence group. There's Surovikin in the upriser group, because although he talked against the Prigozhin camp and talked against the uprising, he still did it in a manner in which they deem that he is on Prigozhin's side, as in he agrees with them rather than agreeing with Gerasimov. And then we have other generals like Deputy Minister of Defense Yevkurov, who was able to move into the category of negotiators, which essentially allowed him to be in a safe position within this ongoing conflict. Because although Prigozhin is now sent to Belarus along with the loyalists among the Wagner group, the tensions in Russia continues, as there is a general assumption of Gerasimov and Shoigu as incompetent leaders, while others are more radical and advocate for change and a more stronger, fiercer leadership among the Russian military. And then there's the neutral faction in the middle who just tries to continue as it is, try to reach a stalemate so that they can finish the war essentially, and then go back and consider changes. And that is the general situation in the front line as well as in Russia. And that is going to be all for this update. Thank you all for watching and have a great day.